Tillotson Street, it looks like global warming has raised its ugly head again. We have snow coming down, which is a sign of global warming, I guess.
We're going to have the ladies here from the League of Women Voters. They're going to get started with their presentation. So if you'll give them your attention, that would be wonderful.
Hi everybody. I know that you probably are thinking you just need to leave, but we have just a couple of presentations to offer you this afternoon. Okay, well, the three of us are members of the League of Women Voters. It's a nonpartisan group. Men and women can belong. And we're happy that you invited us today. We give information to voters, to the general public about all kinds of issues like the environment and elections, and study different issues. And today we're here to talk to you about what happened the last round of elections when Michigan passed Proposition 3 that changed some things about the way we vote, about redistricting, and about the census. So there's handouts about the topics if you'd like them. And you can pick them up on the way out. My name is Pam Tomke. I've lived in Manistee County for about 40 years. I'm married. I have 2 grown children. I'm a member of the League. I'm a retired teacher. And I'm also the clerk in my township, which is Brown Township. And one of my job responsibilities is to be in charge of elections in my township. Each of you has a clerk, either a city clerk or a township clerk, and that's the person that can help you with any questions you have about voting. When Proposition 3 passed a couple of years ago, Michigan changed some very important things about the way that it handles voting. One of the biggest changes is in voting by mail. Could you raise your hand if you've ever voted by mail? Where you get your ballot in the mail, fill it out at home, and then send it back in the mail. Everyone in the state of Michigan who's registered can now do that. You don't have to be a certain age, you don't have to have a reason. You can just get a ballot, fill it out at home at your leisure, and send it back. The other big change that happened is you can register to vote anytime, even on election day. You used to have to register so many days ahead, no more. Any voter can go to a Secretary of State's office up to a certain time before the election, or you can actually go into your precinct and register that day and vote that very day. Another change that happened is that straight party voting is now back as a law. That means you can check one box and vote for everyone of a certain party. If you want to pick and choose a few other candidates, you can do that. Trying to make it easier and more accessible for voters. How many of you know that there's a primary coming up March 10th? It's a presidential primary. It's a unique one. I'm glad to see people are aware of it because it's kind of a different way to vote because you have to say which party you want a ballot for. You're nominating either for Democrats, Republicans, or you can vote just for the proposal which is on the ballot. Ballots will look something like this, only they'll be white. If you want to get a ballot in the mail, you have to apply in writing. All you have to do is contact your clerk, say I want to vote by absent ballot. If you're a registered voter, they'll send you an application to fill out. It might look like this. It might look like this. You can actually print one off the internet if you have that capability. But you do have to sign an application and give a paper application in order to get a ballot. Once your clerk gets your application, they will send you a ballot in the mail, You open it up, you fill in the oval, and you send it back. One really important thing when you're voting by mail,
No, we're all set.
don't forget to sign your outside envelope. All the clerks have your signature on their computer, a scanned signature from when you went to the Secretary of State to get a license or an ID. So they check to make sure that it's really you, because it is a felony in Michigan to fill out a ballot and it's not really you. So Michigan voting is real secure, and it's become more accessible now with Proposition 3. And I have a lot more stuff I could tell you about being a clerk, and I just want to mention one thing. I heard a couple people earlier talking about, well, wish we had paper ballots. Why don't we have paper ballots? When Bill Clinton was elected, I was the clerk in my township, and we had all paper ballots. People got 5 pieces of paper. Some of them were big, small, different colors. They folded them up, put them in a ballot container in a slot. Does anybody remember doing that? And you put it in a big metal ballot box. At the end of the night, the election inspectors would take those all out, unfold them, count them by hand, make tally marks, and we'd be there till 3 or 4 in the morning doing that. Well, now in Michigan, we do have paper ballots. You mark your choice on a piece of paper, put it into a machine that scans it. This paper drops into a box, into a container that's locked, and at the end of the night, instead of counting them by hand, the machine counts them. And the cash register tape, it looks just like a cash register tape, comes out and has counted the votes. So that saves humans from having to look at each piece of paper and count them by hand. But if there's ever a recount, these papers are available. They're sealed in sealed, locked containers. All the clerks have to save them, and they can be taken out and recounted by hand in the case of a recount. But the machines are extremely secure, they're extremely efficient, and it saves having to count all those paper ballots. So it's really the best of both worlds, the electronic world and the world of, having a paper ballot. Who's got a question? His question is, has the ballot counter, they call them the tabulators, ever been hacked? Not to my knowledge. And what happens is every clerk gets a little chip with that election on it that's programmed. It goes into the machine and we run a test. It is open to the public. Mine's going to be tomorrow. And we run test ballots through the machine to make sure it will count every possible vote. If you vote yes, no, part Republican, part whatever, and we test the machine. And then those test results are sent into the county. We lock the machines with a wire seal, and they're not touched again until Election Day, when the voters vote. We set the machines back to 0. And honestly, I have thought about how somebody could hack that. I can't think of a way that you can hack into that system that we have. I mean, it's a good question. And as a voter, you want to make sure that your vote counts and that it's tabulated the way you sent it in. So that was a good question. I really think that Michigan has one of the most secure voting systems that I can't, it's really hard for me to think of a way that voting machines could be hacked into.
Someone could use invisible ink. Some kind of use it's an ink, so
Invisible ink?
So it's there supposedly, then it disappears or something, or
I guess somebody could use invisible ink. That
or it's non-scannable.
never thought of that. Actually, they used to vote in pencil. Now clerks are using like a gel pen that doesn't smear. We've tried all different kinds of gel pens so that you mark it. And if you make a mistake, you can't erase it now. You just get a new ballot. We have lots of extra ballots. So if you do make a mistake, you can get a brand new ballot, and your other one is put in an envelope and set aside. But it's still secret. Your ballot is secret. Nobody knows how you vote. you know, who you voted for. That's one of the things of the election system. Okay, so vote by absent ballot, anyone, no reason, straight party voting, and register anytime. Those are the three big changes in Michigan voting law. Any other questions? If you, yes.
What is the ballot proposal? I didn't hear it.
This coming up in March, Dial Ride has a proposal for general operations renewal and increase. It's a yes, no. You can vote just on that. There's three different ballot styles. You can vote Republican with the proposal, Democrat with the proposal, or just the proposal. You do have to indicate which ballot style you want for this time. Did you have a question?
When you register to vote, is it anytime, even the day before the election?
The question is, can you register the day before? The answer is yes. You can even register the day of the election, but you have to do it at your local office. Now the clerks, like me, in little old Brown Township, I have software now where if someone comes in, I can actually register them on the computer. You can still go to the Secretary of State and register. That's a very efficient way to do it. And once you register, you don't have to go back and renew it. Like if you go back to renew your driver's license, your voter registration stays the same until you move. You move somewhere else. Because you can only vote where you live. You can't, you know, if you go to Florida for part of the year, but you still live in Michigan, you can't vote in Florida. You can only vote in Michigan. One person can vote. That's a good question. Yeah. And you have to bring the proper ID too, in order to register to vote.
Yeah, here's about the Florida thing. What about people that are, let's say, are still in Florida, but they actually live in Michigan? How do they vote now?
They call me and they say, I want to vote by mail, and I send them an application, or they get one online. When I get their application, I will send their ballot wherever they want me to send it. And they can vote as long as they're registered in Michigan. And your question was, what's the proper ID? Michigan driver's license or ID, you know, Michigan ID card, a passport. You can also bring in things like a utility bill with your address on it. Somehow you have to prove that you live where you say you live and that you're a citizen. That's a good question. What else can you think of? I hope you all vote. I hope you tell your friends and neighbors to vote. It's easy to vote in Michigan, and it's super important. You know, if you don't make your vote known, then don't complain. You can't complain. That's right. So
Michigan always has a backup, a paper backup, unlike like some of these other states, they're doing electronic with no paper backup. It's just terribly ridiculous.
that they've had some problems that you probably heard about it on the news. I have too.
Yeah, it's easy to hack in.
But Michigan, and how to recount, but Michigan does have paper, because you write your vote on paper and it is saved, and securely saved in the case of a recount. Yeah.
There's supposedly these new driver's licenses that are coming out this year.
Right.
Have you seen any of them?
Right,
yet?
with the star on it?
I don't know, what is
Yeah.
that, what is that?
Yeah. If you want to fly on any place in the country, like you want to fly to Florida or get on a plane, fly to Arizona, whatever, if you don't have a passport, you're going to have the star put on your driver's license. You just go to the Secretary of State, bring, maybe it's a birth certificate or a passport, to prove that, yes, you are a citizen. It's just a layer of security. It's Homeland Security in action. Whether you agree with it or not, you still have to have it. Or you can bring a passport to the airport if you don't have that star. That's going to go into effect next year in October. So you have time to take care of it. Wow, good questions. Anybody else? Thank you so much. There's some real technical paperwork if you want to take it home and study it or give it to your friends. And thank you so much for your attention and your questions.
Thank you, Pam. Albee with the League of Women Voters, along with Pam and our other presenter, Fran, that some of you probably already know Fran. She might have helped you with some of your health insurance questions. The second thing that we want to talk about that has happened in Michigan is the new nonpartisan Citizens Redistricting Commission that happened because of Proposal 2 in Michigan. Prior to Proposal 2, Michigan, the lines drawn for our legislative districts was done by the legislature. And that would cause some difficulty, and so we decided to go with the Redistricting Commission, a Citizens Redistricting Commission. And so Proposal 2 has amended the Constitution, and we actually have in the Michigan Constitution a Citizens Redistricting Commission. And I'm going to show you a little bit of some slides here, and then I've got some information on the table up here about the Redistricting Commission and how you or people you know can get involved in it. And let's see. This is kind of the structure of the Redistricting Commission. There will be 13 members on the commission, 4 Democrats, 5 Independents, and 4 Republicans. The commission eligibility and qualifications, you have to be a registered voter if you want to get on the commission, and you must submit an application. The eligibility requirements, a candidate or elected official, if you're not people that you cannot be on the commission if you're a candidate or an elected official, if you're a lobbyist or paid consultant, if you are an officer or member of a governing body, or an employee of a legislator. Commission eligibility, so if you want to be one, this is, you cannot be a parent, stepchild, etc., of a spouse who disqualified from that, disqualified for appointment of elected officials. Commissions are ineligible for holding partisan elective office. So you have to be kind of just a general citizen. All right, what they're going to do, and this is how it's already started now, the Secretary of State in Michigan sent out 10,000 random applications to citizens around the country, or around Michigan. And from that, she will select 30 Dems, 30 Republicans, and 40 Independents, just at random, out of the pool. And then they'll narrow it down, and they'll end up 60, they'll have 60, they'll have in the pool 60 Republicans, 60 Democrats, 80 Independents, and half of the random applications. That's how they'll do that. And then the legislative leaders each get 5 strikes, and then we end up with 13 on the commission. And what happens with the commission, before voting on a map, the map must be tested using appropriate technology that it complies with the criteria. And the final plan may be adopted with a majority vote, which must include at least 2 commissioners from each major political party, plus 2 commissioners who affiliate with neither party. In the event of a deadlock, ranked choice voting is the secondary voting mechanism. If a tie occurs, the Secretary of State selects the final map. Now, the commissioners are going to, the 13 people that are actually on the commission are going to have an opportunity, they'll have help in planning the maps. And after the maps are decided on what they're going to use, the commission will have some rules that they have to follow. They have to have equal population in each district, geographically contiguous. They can't have a squiggly line. Years ago they called it gerrymandering because of a district that was gerrymandered by a gentleman on the East Coast. It has to be all of those things. The district has to be reasonably, in terms of geographic, in terms of population and reflect that region. Public participation, there'll be, once the maps are finalized by the commission, they'll have 10 public hearings in different geographic locations around the state, and so that everybody has an opportunity to look at them. 5 public hearings are required after the proposed maps are drawn. They'll have, open meetings are required. Meetings must be accessible online, via television, etc. The public can submit plans. You can have a voice in how you think that the line should be drawn. The commission must publish the plans and allow 45 days of public comment. The commission, its staff, and etc. In conclusion, may not disclose redistricting matters with the public outside of the public hearings. If a plan, after the plan is adopted, the commission must publicize the plan and a report explaining the decisions and the material, how they ended up drawing the lines. By December the 1st, 2020, each census year thereafter, the legislature must appropriate at least 25% of the general fund budget purpose to the Secretary of State's general fund budgeting for the commissioners. Let's see, go to the next one, the timing. So January 1st of this year, they sent out 10,000 applications. June 1st, application deadline. So if you know of anybody that wants to get in, they can apply. By July 1st of this year, they start eliminating, making disqualifications from those applications they've received. August 1st of this year, legislative leaders strike some of their candidates. By September the 1st of this year, the Secretary of State randomly selects out of those ones that are approved, she selects the commissioners. And on November 1st of this year, November 1st of 2021, the final redistricting plan must be adopted. So basically, they've got a little more than a year to the commissioners to work on a plan. You could apply, or you know someone that might want to apply. It's a unique opportunity to have a voice in how the plans are drawn. It's a nice job opportunity. Here's some common questions that are asked. The commission has power to set its own workplace policies. Employers are required to hold your job while you serve. So if you want to serve, you're working elsewhere, but you want to serve on the commission, you should be able to have time off. Selection is random, but when the pool is narrowed to 200, it must be weighted to reflect the geographic and demographic parts of our state. The applicant determines his or own party affiliation, but must attest to it under oath. Those who are ineligible to serve on the commission can participate in the redistricting process by proposing a map. You may have somebody who's a leader in your community that wants to propose some ideas.
Yeah.
All right. And it is a paid position. I believe, am I right, it was $40,000 for a year's work. And obviously, it does require that you meet in different places around the state, I'm sure, with the other commissioners who are selected. So it is an actual job that you could apply for. And if you're not interested, you may know of others in your community that might be interested in it. So tell them to check it out and look at it. It's an opportunity for us to have a fairer way of selecting our districts and how they are outlined. So I hope that you will consider it. I've got some handouts up here on the table about the redistricting commission and how you can apply. Or you can, maybe you want to take it to someone you know who might be interested. Or you may have some ideas about how you want to approach this or how you think drawing maps should be approached. So please consider submitting some of your ideas to the commission through the Secretary of State's office. I'm sure you could do that. Any questions?
How long will these people be on this committee once they're on?
How long? That's just, they're on just 1 year. And then in 4 years, or in 10 years, when we do our census again, we'll have a new redistricting commission. So it'll be that whatever plan is adopted by 2021 will be on for 10 years.
have new people every year?
No, not every year, every 10 years. The commission only serves for a year. And then it will be 10 years again before we do our population count every 10 years. And it will be after every census, we'll have a new redistricting commission.
Are the people gonna be on that committee for 10 years,
No, they serve 1 year.
they won't know what they're doing?
They serve 1 year. What do you mean they won't know what they're doing?
Well, if you or I were on that committee right now for 1 year, we would not know exactly what we want to do, but in a couple of years, you get the experience, and you'd be able
Well,
to
I
do it.
think there's a lot of guidance that will go into it and helping them with the map drawing and the decisions that they make and how the districts go. And people that apply are probably gonna do a lot of homework to start with, so they know what they're doing. And now, a year's worth of work together with other commissioners will help. And even previously, our districts were drawn by the legislatures. So it depended on who was in power, and that could cause some issues. So this is a fairer way to do it. Actually, in I believe 1963, when the Michigan Constitution was redone, they had a call in that constitutional amendment that, or a constitutional, when it was drawn up at that time, they wanted to have a citizens redistricting commission, and it got struck down, and they didn't have it. So we have talked about this for more than 50 years, of wanting to have a nonpartisan redistricting commission rather than leaving it to our legislators to do it. So I think it's, yes.
How are you considered independent, Democrat or Republican? What criteria? Say I wrote down, say I've always been independent, then this time I wanted to, in order to vote a primary, you gotta be Republican or Democrat, you can't be independent basically. So are you gonna be pegged as one or the other? I mean, how can you?
Well, when you're applying, you put down whether you're an independent or a Republican or a Democrat or what you're thinking on the application.
It's a
Right.
subjective thing?
Pardon?
It's subjective?
Well, somewhat, I think they do.
You self-certify.
You kind of self-certify it, you're saying that you're kind of taking an oath that I am a certified Republican, or certified Democrat, or a certified independent. So we're going on the honor system with our, and there may be people that say, well, sometimes I vote Republican, sometimes I vote Democrat, sometimes I vote
Right.
independent, sometimes I vote for the Green Party or whatever.
Right.
And so you have we're asking the citizen to tell the truth, that this is.
Just say that? You voted all over the place?
Well, you would certify and say, I vow that I am an independent.
Oh, okay, I got you. Now, wasn't that taken to court? I mean, when they passed that law, wasn't that challenged in court? I heard that.
The redistricting commission itself,
No, that that when it passed.
that
they
proposal, when proposal two
Yeah,
passed,
yeah. Did they take up the court on that?
I'm not.
Yeah, there are 2 pending lawsuits on this right now.
Oh.
But so far, the lower courts have upheld it.
Oh, okay.
So they're moving forward until they find out otherwise.
Oh, I see, okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
Would you define gerrymandering, what the term actually means?
What was that guy's name? The fellow that was,
There was a guy named Eldridge Gary, and he wanted to get reelected in, I think it was Massachusetts, I
East
think.
Coast somewhere.
Yeah, so gerrymandering is the drawing of legislative districts to maximize the
Your vote.
the likelihood that the incumbent will be reelected. That's what gerrymandering is. So it isn't a Republican thing, and it isn't a Democratic thing. It's pretty much, and who's in, if you're in power, you want to stay in power, is pretty much. And that's why,
And that elder Jerry,
he pronounced it Gary. I mean,
Gary.
but it's
It
spelled
became-
Jerry, so
it
that's.
became gerrymandering
Yeah.
after him, because he drew this very weird district, if you can go back and look at it and how the way he drew it, to make sure he could get reelected. And we see gerrymandering all over the country on both sides of the aisle. not just on one or the other, so, it's always an issue. Yes,
I think that gerrymandering guy, it looked something like a mud puppy.
Yeah, like a salamander.
Yeah, see?
And that's where the mander part came, I
But
think.
my question is, what happens on this, I'll wait till he's done.
what happens with what?
What happens when these districts are drawn, and I don't like the way it is, but the Democrat or Republican governor vetoes the whole thing, then what?
The governor can't veto it. The governor cannot veto it. This is the redistricting commission.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
You do believe that?
Yeah, it's built into the proposal.
It's, yeah, it's part of the proposal, and it's Michigan law.
Okay.
It's
So it
actually in
is
the
not,
Constitution.
it's in the Constitution, it's not something that can be changed. Yes, John?
Is there any other states have similar, like proposal to type,
The way I understand, the one state that I do know that has a little bit of something similar is Arizona, and it has worked very well there. I think.
And California has done it for many years too.
Arizona and California both have redistricting commissions similar to what this is.
And they were both challenged in court and they were both upheld.
it's best to have a fair for all
As
sides.
fair as you
so
can
no
make
one
it,
always
right.
thinks the other side gets something.
Yeah, as fair as you can. Any other questions? But I urge you to look at some of the details here. If you're not interested in being on the commission, you may know of someone that is. So take them some literature and spread the word that they have an opportunity to get a job. Okay, and now we're gonna have Fran Wallace from the league talk about the importance of the 2020 census, which is
So you guys have
vital.
been very patient, I'm not gonna say. You guys have been very patient, so I'm not gonna take up a lot of your time, I'm not gonna just go through the slides. But we do have some handouts, and you should know that, that the Council on Aging is gonna be very active in helping people fill out the census. So, how many have ever filled out a census? Do you remember? I mean, they do it, the last time we did it was 2010, and I don't know if you remember, but it was a long form. It was really a lot. This year's census is going to be very short. It's got 9 questions for basically each person in your household, and you're gonna receive it very soon. Okay? So I'm going to start talking about what it is, and the Constitution says we have to count all U.S. residents, people who live here. I didn't make that up, they put it in the Constitution. Census, does anybody know when Census Day is?
April 1st.
April 1st, and it's not because it's April Fool's Day. But you're going to get a questionnaire in March. It's going to come in the mail, and it's going to come in the first 2 weeks in March. And that your census form will come that way. So, and it's going to ask you about people who are living in your house, or expected to be living in your house, because it's going to come in March, on April 1st. And it's going to ask you about all those people that are there, their age, their gender, and there are only 2 choices, and things like that. So who's going to do this? Well, most of it's going to come in the mail. You can mail it back, you can answer by phone, it'll tell you how to do that, and you can answer online. How many of you like to do things online? Well, that's pretty unanimous. But it is important to answer it quickly. You know, I mean, we get this thing in the mail and we haven't seen it before, and you know, I don't know that I really want to deal with this right now, right? But it's very important to send it back in quickly. And that's where the Council on Aging is going to help, is if you don't want to mess with the online stuff, or you don't want to mail it back, you could come to one of these events that the Council on Aging, am I saying that right? Yeah, the Council on Aging is going to do, and they'll help you respond online if you want to. And there's a lot of evidence that if you don't respond quickly, that adds more to an undercount. And one of the handouts that I have is related to why it's important. It's called Counting for Dollars. And, you know, you might want to share it with people or just take a look at it yourself. But in the last year for which we had data, Michigan had, is that trillion or billion?
Billy.
Billion? $29 billion came here. And if, for every person that isn't counted, I think the number I've seen is we lose $1,800. So if you respond, if the sooner people respond, the less likely it is to have an undercount. So that's really important. So that's it. The census is important for things like what Linda talked about gerrymandering and things like that, about having redistricting done. They use the data for that. But it's important for a lot of other things. It's money. It's very important for the money aspect of it. So somebody asked a question earlier about if somebody was in Florida, you know. Well, there are going to be people who are in Florida in March, but the letter's going to come to their residence. So it's important to be counted where you live most of the time. And so if you get your mail forwarded and that kind of thing, and there'll be efforts by states. Florida will want the people from Michigan who go down to Florida to be counted in Florida because of the money aspect and other things. But again, that's why it's important to be counted wherever you are. How do they count people who aren't at home? What if someone's in the hospital? There are ways to count people if they're in the hospital. How do they count people in the military? How do they count people who might be incarcerated? Everybody's got to be counted. And that's the goal here. So you can, and then you respond by paper, phone, or internet. I don't have a handout on this, but it's important to understand that these data are kept incredibly confidential. Even in this day and age, not even the president, not even our current president, can see these data, can see the data down to the level of you being a person. You know, they see the raw data. But so it's very, very confidential. So you do not have to worry about responding to this, even if it's online. They understand how important this is. And it's not like this is the Census Bureau's first rodeo. They've been doing this for a long time. And they know how to they know the importance of these data, and they know how to keep it confidential. So I'm going to kind of stop there, because you've been very patient listening to all this. And if anyone has any questions, I'll put the rest of the handouts out and hand them around. Yeah.
I worked the census 2 times.
How was it?
Boring. Anyway,
It was boring?
I was part of the cleanup crew that would go through and all these vacant houses and stuff. But you were talking about the long form. I had the long form, but I think you're required to answer 4 questions.
Okay.
Name,
Name?
address. I'm not sure about sex. Name and address. Not much.
Yeah, there's not much. It's gender, name, address, age, I think, is on there. And it's important because, you know, you want to count, children often get undercounted.
Well, the reason I'm saying that is because
Yeah.
you might be asked to answer the long form, which is very long.
We don't have the long form anymore. It's gone.
It's gone.
9 questions.
If the long form is gone, and it's been
Okay.
replaced. It's been replaced by something called the American Community Survey. And they've been doing that for some years, since the last time we had the long form was 2010. And some people do get the American Community Survey, and you may get it, you may have gotten it, some of you may have gotten it in the mail. It's real long. But that's not this. This is the decennial census, is just those basic questions.
Well, I had a question on my phone. I got the long form
You got the American Community Survey, okay.
a long time ago, 10 years ago.
Oh, okay. Well,
And I wasn't very happy about it. So you had to write down your race, white, whatever it was. And I wrote down Eskimo. Just to see what happened. I had somebody either call me or come to the house. I don't know what it was. And that's just a joke.
Well, you know,
He
that's,
didn't think it was very funny.
no, well, you raise a really good point, because they do ask a question about race. And they ask a question about ethnicity, about whether or not you're Hispanic or Latino.
Right.
And given all the stuff that's been going on, you know, you might think that's a kind of scary question. But the reason they ask those is census data are used to qualify people for certain programs. And some of the programs that we supply are that the government does are they need to know information about that kind of status. It's because it's been asked in the past, and they want to be able to have some continuity, you know, to see how the population is changing. So I see why you had the reaction that you had, but it's not intended to be discriminatory in any way. It's just intended to be informational.
It's not a joke, you know, messing around with the census and putting inaccurate information isn't gonna help anybody, and nobody's gonna think it's funny.
I thought
Take
it
it
was.
seriously.
Yeah.
Well, it isn't a joke. And if you
Okay.
wanna make sure your community in our state gets the money we need, make sure it's accurate and make sure.
But that's interesting that you got the follow-up too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, John.
Yes, I saw an article in the paper that about a big percentage of people in Manistee never responded to it.
Yes.
And if Manistee is not really out in the boondocks type, compared to maybe Montana or Colorado, some places, there must be a lot of people that are not counted throughout the country.
There are undercounts, and
What do you do about that?
well, one thing that can be done is the kind of thing we're trying to do here. And you can help by talking to people to say, this is, you know, this is a real thing, it really matters, you're gonna get it. We can educate people, because I don't know how much is being done by the government itself, you know? So you can be a big help on that whole issue of undercounting, and you can help people understand that they need to respond, and the sooner the better.
Aren't there people that are actually go out there and go to people's houses and?
Yes, there
try-
will be, there will be.
That's done as a follow-up, and of course, we've been doing this census, like this since the 18th century. So they've obviously been doing it a lot of different ways. And there used to be people, and maybe you were one of them, who was an enumerator.
That'd be
who would-
correct.
Right, who would go out and actually ask the questions. But this year, it's different. They're really trying to get the response by mail, by phone, through the internet. It's very unlikely that somebody's gonna knock on your door. As far as I know, the only place they're really doing that is Alaska, because a lot of those people don't have addresses. But there have been people who've been doing census work, and actually, if you're interested, the census is still hiring. And you can go to census.gov and see about applying. And in Manistee County, I'm pretty sure they're paying $25 an hour.
That's correct.
Is that right?
It's quite a bit.
It's quite a bit. It's more than in some of the surrounding counties. And you can still apply.
And you can work a minimum number of hours, you can kind of go according to your schedule type thing, helping them. I know I've got several people I know that said they've been working on the census for the last month or so, really verifying addresses within our county and trying to make sure we get an accurate count here.
Because there are places, Onekama, for example, and I'm not sure what other places, but in the village, they use a post office box. They don't get mail delivered to their house. So what they need to be, what some of the workers have been doing is tying that post office box to a resident's address so that the mail will work, so they don't have to have somebody go out and take it to them.
It is an interesting case. I've sometimes gone knocking doors
Yeah.
during political season. You meet some interesting people that you would never meet.
Yeah, so, well, you ought to think about the
It's an
census as a
interesting-
job.
One way, I used to get these, when I got my daily thing,
Mm-hmm.
I had a map that was about this big.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like a square mile, something like
Mm-hmm.
that. And part of my thing, I was out in Wellston,
Uh-huh.
and my thing was, they had all these roads on the map, but there was no name. So, no name of the roads, and paths, and, you know, and it was like, I would say, go to no name road and turn left on no name road, and turn right on a road that has no name, literally. And then there was, one time I remember I was totally confused where I was. And I stopped a farmer, and my map had a T on it. And I couldn't figure out where I was. I was supposed to keep going, and the guy said, "Oh, that's a subdivision that they've been working on that for 10 years." And there was nothing, it was just a field.
And you know, it's different now than when you did it, because you relied on a paper map,
Yeah,
and you know how they do it now? On their, you get an application on the phone, it's the GPS, you know, it's all, so a lot of these things are different now. Anybody else?
No, you mentioned about the mail, it would come in your PO box if you don't have a residential address.
I think so. There's a gentleman named Chris, I can't think of his last name, who's the person who's doing the census work around here. And I asked him that at one of these presentations, because they normally do not send to a post office box. But he said that I think there's this protocol where they can somehow or other match up the box to the residence address. And so in that instance, I believe they will send it to the post office box, but I'm not, I'm 80% sure on that, but, yeah. Yeah, if that's why I think they're doing this address verification, to tie the two things together, I think. Well, thanks for your patience. I'll put the handouts back over here. And that's it.
Well, we're glad you came, thank you.
Thank you.
And the census is so important. I hope you will all take it seriously and let your neighbors and friends and family know.
don't be like me.
Not something to mess with if we want accurate money.
Money, 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 money.
It's all about money.
Well, good evening. About 7 o'clock on a Wednesday, Mike Tillotson in Oak Hill. There's a little snow tonight. You don't have to be scared. By the time this gets on, the snow will be melted. Just really a filler, like most of the stuff you see on regular TV. Doesn't make much difference if you ever watch it. We've had more snow this year than last year, which is kind of surprising because there's hardly anything on the ground. We don't have any snowdrifts, banks. months. At any one time, there's probably 500 tankers operating. And one tanker going down is nothing. Then the clever ploy that they have is the, I guess, summer blend and winter blend. And of course the prices are going to go up. And I'm not convinced, nor I don't think any consumer is convinced that there's any difference in the gasoline. Put a little of something in it or take something out, but it doesn't affect the performance at all. There's no way that you can put something in and charge 20 cents more and then 6 months later take it out and then charge 20 cents again. Seems like one way or the other you'd take it out, take the price off, reduce it. What do I know? Just to keep you up on the news, Stone, he's an attorney. Trump's friends is allegedly doing this or doing that. None of what he was charged of sounded very serious. Some department recommended he get 7 to 9 years in prison. The guy's already 70. And like commentators were saying, well, Dave, people that murder and rape, the average sentence is 4 years. So I guess we all have to admit finally that what you're guilty of is not going to have much to do with your sentence. Historically, if you stole something from a local gas station, like a 6-pack of beer, you get caught, your penalty is going to be much more severe, especially if it's like second or third offense and if you embezzle $50,000 from the employer. Well, we got an inch of snow or so in the last hour. About time. I was starting to get worried about global warming. You know me. I worry about things like that. Global warming, all the glaciers will melt. Okay, they'll melt in the southern hemisphere. Then in July, they'll melt in the northern hemisphere. But then they build up again because God keeps making it snow. Snow packs down. More and more snow. It becomes ice because the North Pole is so big that forms hundreds and hundreds of glaciers. If not thousands, I'm not sure. same thing as South Pole. Then as the sheer weight of the glaciers push them down into the ocean, they start to float. But then they can't hold anymore. They break off. Just like if we get some cold now, build some ice up in the spring, we'll have global warming, and all the ice on Lake Manistee is going to melt, which is proof again of global warming. It happens every year. I am one person who believes in global warming. I should say, I want global warming. I don't believe in global warming. I want global warming. And if I don't like it. See, I was looking at some pictures the other day, and in April, we had snow on the ground. I got photographs. I think it was April. And in some parts of January now, you hardly have any snow. And that's very confusing. As I've told you before, it is so confusing. And I'm just on the way home nice and safe, nice and easy speed. So I have lots of time to ramble. And I'm trying to fill some my SD card. Not even tape, it's a little teeny SD card. Quarter inch. About 3/8 of an inch on the side. It'll hold hours and hours and hours of video. Or I put one of those little cards in my still camera, which is also a video camera. It'll hold 5,000 pictures. Little card is about 3/8, like the size of your fingernail. Way back, when I was doing a lot of experimenting with film, I bought a camera which was a 4x5 inch press. I'm never going to be foolish to do it, but I had a lot of fun with it. Take really great pictures, had a big, huge enlarger. Massive thing. I think I paid $25 for it. It was so obsolete. Probably cost $1,000 new. It's what press photographers used to use. And they could take a picture with a single piece of film and go back to darkroom and develop it. And they didn't have to waste a lot of film, except 4x5 inches was as much film as a 35 millimeter roll of film, 36 exposure, had about 4x5 inches of film. But the film, the 4x5 film